Melyssa Ford confronts Ish for hating on Joe Budden. That's right, on an episode of Joe Budden's Patreon, Top Tier Corny, Melyssa Ford astutely observed that Joe Budden and Ish have a relationship that seemingly is based on competition more so than organic friendship vibes. And this was a fascinating deep dive into the dynamics of the Joe Budden Podcast. Not just Joe Budden and Ish, but Joe Budden and Imani, Joe Budden Ice, Joe Budden and Parks, and several others in the podcast universe as far as the Joe Budden Podcast is concerned. So I have to say, this Patreon episode was really good, and it seemed like the cast found its footing without Flip, who I must say, when he initially arrived, I thought was a great pick-me-up for the show, but as of late, I feel like his loud antics kind of disrupt the listening experience for me. Maybe I'm just getting older, and I don't necessarily need him around because, the pod be sounding so loud. Like, I wake up in the morning and listen, and it just be a lot. But anyway, here is what happened. Melyssa Ford, towards the back half of this Patreon, gets into this spiel about how the dynamics of the Joe Budden Podcast played out at Joe Budden's last birthday party. And I'm talking about, she goes from top to bottom. But what I really want to focus is her observation of Ish and Joe's dynamic. She basically said at the party, it looked like the two were like magnets. Like when they walked around each other, they kind of were like in a duel. Like it was like when one walked to one side of the room, the other walked to the other side of the room. And Melyssa Ford just straight up asked Ish, are you in competition with Joe? Now, of course, Ish would deny that, but I have to say that I think they actually are in competition, and there's a lot of factors. I think Ish sees Joe as a threat as far as the ladies are concerned. I think Ish likes the challenge of Joe. He likes to be able to outshine Joe because he's a famous person, so any win he gets in the ladies department is magnified times 1,000. Imagine if you had a famous friend and you went to war for a girl and you actually won. Now, I'm not saying you're going to win most of the times, but the times you do win, you're going to act like you're the man. And I think that's why Joe respects Ish so much. He can bag the broads, man. And Melyssa Ford also focuses on Imani, and she basically said Imani's like Joe Budden's little brother. Imani jokingly says that he doesn't like that, but he's emotional, so I think deep down inside he was really, really offended. And, Ice is just like a non-threat. That's what kind of Melyssa Ford observes. And she also talks about Parks and kind of how he is just genuinely so key to Joe Budden's current universe in terms of he'll always be around. He's just key and he's essential. But one thing that is interesting about this show is that this was a complete ISO for Melyssa Ford. Now, what she said was fascinating. It was indeed a deep dive, but what we saw was her taking over. She was being a bit of a mic for once. And I don't know if she's growing. I don't know if her contract is up soon or she wants to get a pay boost. But I've never seen this side of Melyssa Ford. This was the first time in her 2 years being there that I was like, oh my gosh, she's carrying the podcast. She's completely carrying the podcast. And I don't know if it's like a Patreon situation where Joe's okay with that. Because on the actual podcast, Joe doesn't let that happen. He'd be like, oh, we need to move on. We need to keep going. He just sat back and shut the hell up. And I think it was because Melyssa Ford was doing such a great job. Now, back to the dynamic between Joe Budden and Ish. These two guys have had a history. I know through back channels that, yes, and front channels that they've slept with many of the same women. Their Eskimo brothers both proclaim to have slept with under 300 women. They probably have at least 33% in common, the way they be talking on that podcast. And on top of that, I don't know if it's common knowledge, but the lady that Joe had over for hookah, she wasn't just no regular lady. She wasn't just a lady of the night who had a rate. She was someone who was special and near and dear to one of the members' hearts at one point in their lives. So these guys really have fascinating dynamic. Ish stopped talking to Joe for years, and it's just something that we have to monitor. It's just something that we've seen before, and I sometimes wonder how will Ish time on the Joe Budden Network end, and I think it will end maybe in an amicable way, but I don't know because I'm sure Ish thinks he's underpaid. Just the conversations he be having, like when they were talking about the Rory $40,000 thing, he was quiet. He also seemed to not like that Flip got paid while he was suspended. And during the negotiation episode, he said, I make, you don't pay as much as like UPS. This isn't entry level. Why are you paying me like this? I should be paid more. So I just think overall he feels a bit underappreciated paycheck wise. And you see that with the moping and the inability to kind of, put himself out there. And, very great episode. I think it was called Top Tier Corny. And J1 also had a good presence. He was kind of breaking down each members of the pod show. And J1 remains someone who is kind of Joe Budden's henchman. Every time someone new arrives to the show, whether it be Flip, Imani, or J1, they kind of get there with the ambitions of changing the dynamic. And they become the voice for Joe Budden, right? Hey, man, turn things up. And you see them echo the same talking points. I think with every member that joins the show, Joe Budden probably has a conversation with them about the current dynamic of the show and how they can help to make things easier. And that's what J1 has been doing. He's not afraid to clash with a lot of members of the show. For now, that's going to change. I remember when Flip was like that. I remember when Imani was like that. Then over time, they stopped and they kind of fell into trying to be besties. And now Flip, when he first got there, I'm going to challenge you. Ish. I hate you. Ish. Eventually, he started going to the, I'm everybody's brother. I love you. These are my guys. When it just didn't make no sense. You knew these guys for like 3 weeks. How are you already saying that? Imani, same thing. When he first arrived on the Patreon, he was calling Ice out for not knowing how to pod. And now J1 is following that same path. But we have to keep our eyes on J1. I think the podcast treats him with kid gloves largely because he's Jadakiss' son. They do not want that smoke with someone who's a prominent figure in the industry. So I think they largely chill out on him and let him do what he wants. And I also want to add that an interesting situation occurred towards the back end of this episode. And that was Joe basically saying that he didn't really like Academics Girl making the block hot. Remember, Academics Girl posted them going to Joe Budden's party, and Joe Budden did not seem like a fan of that. And I would venture to guess Joe Budden probably be hitting up Academics through the back channels like many people do and letting them know, hey, man, maybe this isn't the shorty for you. But you know what I'm going to say? I think sometimes guys love a girl that keeps them on their toes. Disrespectful. I hate you. I mean, at this point, you just got to take what it is with Academics. I don't care who he's with. That is his bag. Let that bag be his bag until he grows out of it, because he will grow out of it at some point. At some point, he'll be like, all right, this is stupid. I need to move on. And that'll be the end. But who knows if maybe that young lady will change. Maybe that young lady will change for him. Who knows? We have to monitor. But like I said, Top Tier Corny Patreon, actually a really good episode. And the last pod of the Joe Budden Podcast was also pretty good. I think these guys are on a run. Maybe they're happy Flip left. Oh, do I want to wake that up? Maybe they're happy they can finally hear each other speak. Oh, man, I might have to move to Idaho now. Flip might not like this commentary. We'll have to see how Flip comes back. If Flip comes back and it's constant tension, people are like, damn, son. When the substitute teacher, they come in, everybody's worried of the substitute teacher, but they're like, oh, this guy's actually pretty good, or this girl's pretty good. But then the real teacher comes back and like, damn, man, he messed up the vibes. He's not letting people come 5 minutes late. Now he's clocking everybody. Like, he's grading us. He's docking our points. I'm going to be anxious to see if that happens with Flip. And I think it's going to happen with Flip. But only time will tell. All right, y'all. Please remember to follow me on Instagram, The Stop TV. Please remember to follow me on Twitter, The Stop TV. I love all of you guys, the stoppers, the people who hate me. You are all part of the process. And I just want to let you know that I'm appreciative, because when you post on YouTube or when you post on any media platform, you want to be heard. You want to be seen. Anybody who says they don't do it for the views or they don't do it to engage with the audience, oftentimes is just trying to deal with the reality they have. I'm grateful for the audience I've built. Even the people saying that, I've largely done this because of the podcast I report on. No, I built the audience. These people on the podcast, they weren't responding to every comment the first few years. Like me, I respond to every comment. People criticize me for being in the comment sections of other channels who make videos about me, but I just always saw that as fan engagement. And that's the same thing I do on Spaces. So I just want to let you know that I'm appreciative of the community. And on top of that, YouTube is making more changes to its platform, changes that I think you need to be aware of. And one of those changes that I believe impacted the Joe Budden podcast was they are instituting a Spanish, language translation that Joe Budden just used on his channel. And it's going to be rolled out to a bunch of creators, and Joe has access to it right now. And here you see a clip.
La letra de esa canción definitivamente representa un problema para el día de los mayores ingresos publicitarios del año. Si logra sacar uno de esos versos es un G.
So we'll see how that impacts things. The views for that are paltry. I don't think they're getting many views on the Joe Budden podcast. But if you look at the reggaeton artists, if you look at Bad Bunny, they get like 1 billion views for anything they do. So maybe Joe might figure out a way to get on that Latino algorithm. And on top of that, YouTube is going to be introducing a new like feature, but they're going to call it hype. And there's going to be a hype leaderboard. And hey, when that happens, I hope a lot of you hype me up. Like that song, Chicken Noodle Soup. Hype me up like that, man. And then YouTube is also going to create another feature, one that I think is very important, especially for this type of channel that has a big community around it. One that is significantly outsizing the size of the channel, and that is a new community feature that's more like Reddit, that is more like Discord, where you can upload fan art, where you can have conversations, you can post things. And I hope when I launch that on my channel, all of you participate. But yeah, there's a lot of changes going on with YouTube. There's a lot of changes going on with this channel, and I'm happy you're all here for the ride. All right, y'all. Please remember to follow me where I said to follow me before: Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, The Stop TV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.
Hold on, y'all. I gotta make sure this nigga Danny not in here.